Greetings and welcome, my friends, to the First Church of the Presence of God. This is Discourse number 3, and we're holding it here in the Virtual Cathedral. I want to thank you for joining us, and when I say us, I mean me and my invisible friends who are always with me, no matter where I am, no matter where I go, no matter what I do. Now, lest it appear that I think of myself as being special and that I have invisible friends and you don't. Well, actually, everyone has invisible friends. Not everyone knows this, okay? And not all of them, and especially in these days, not all of them are friends, okay? And I say that they are invisible because often enough they are, up to the point where we can finally see them, because that does happen. Because as you practice the presence of God, which is what this church is all about and what these videos are all about, as you continue to practice the presence of God, God comes more and more into you. And a time will come that the bandwidth of your senses will expand and you'll be able to see things that you weren't able to see before because previously the material world had placed filters over your ability to see and to hear as well, and other senses are also impacted. But as you practice the presence of God within, and as God comes more and more into you, God becomes more and more what you are and begins to communicate through you. And this is something that any of us can do, but it really requires you to be committed. And I always like to point out that there are 3 things you almost certainly always have to have: faith, certitude, and determination. You have to believe, and you have to have conviction, which is also certitude, and you have to have determination, because otherwise you're not going to continue. It just isn't going to happen, and you're going to be challenged. Everyone who attempts to practice the presence of God and goes about through their life as if God were committing all of the acts they commit, as if God were thinking the thoughts they have, as if God were speaking when they speak. Well, you're going to get challenged on that. And not necessarily by people you run into every day, because they might not even know that this is happening, unless you're running around telling everybody, which I don't think is such a great idea. Because people will very likely think you're crazy, and not in a real nice, attractive way. But the fact is that ever since there have been people on this world, and ever since there's been a God, which is forever, and always there always will be, people have talked to God, and God has talked to them. Now, many people talk to God and don't get answers because God waits. God proves you out. God wants to make sure you're not a dilettante or one of those New Age spiritual warrior, inconsistent parishioners, so to speak. Yeah, someone who isn't all that committed, God's not going to waste his time. God's very selective about who he speaks to. And lest there be any confusion here, let us not say I have to move the monitor up, because I just realized that's where the time is. So I know when to cut myself off. um, yeah, God's speaking to you. I don't want to give a false impression to people about it being God, the Almighty God, speaking to you. I mean, I think that probably does happen on occasion. Depends on who you are. But usually God communicates to you through someone else, and quite often through an angel, because an angel is kind of a filter. If you're not prepared or your vibrations have not been raised to the necessary level, you could be burned to a cinder if God were speaking directly to you. So, but the angel is the voice of God, is literally God, because they are transparencies through which God expresses himself. And he has all these different kinds of angels that do different jobs. But it's always God speaking or moving through every single one of them. And this church is about the celebration of the presence of God and loving God and communicating with God. Now, I spoke to God all my life. And God would speak back to me if I were in an altered state of consciousness, but only then mostly, or if something very dramatic or traumatic were about to happen and I was being warned, yeah, then it would happen. But it was not long ago that he began speaking to me on a regular basis. Whenever I spoke to him, he'd answer me. In 7, 8, 9 years, I don't know, something like that. But yet I have been trying to cause this to happen for decades. And believe me, I was insistent. And believe me, I screamed at him. I yelled at him. I pleaded with him. I talked nice. I talked not so nice. You probably get the picture. Because you can't pursue God with any degree of intensity for very long and not get angry with God. Okay? Because it takes a while for you to evolve to the point where you can accept everything that happens to you as being God's will and to your advantage and for your betterment, whether you can see it or not, because, well, it's come to be proven out to you. And so there it goes. Now, I'm not a Christian, and I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm a Christian, although I am a follower of Jesus Christ. And I believe sincerely in Jesus Christ, but I don't want anyone to be thinking I'm a Christian, because I don't operate according to that. And I believe that God expresses himself through every legitimate religion, and that there are others besides Jesus Christ who are empowered with the divine imprimatur and power and force. In fact, I know this for sure. And in Christianity, some of the sects or various types of Christian churches, they have traditional aspects to them. And as has been said in the Bible, God had one message for the masses and one message for the disciples and initiates. Okay? And there are certain Christian teachings that kind of emphasize that more than your traditional churches, Methodists, Lutherans, Episcopalians, this sort of thing. For instance, like the Christian Scientists, the Gnostics, the Essenes. Now, I'm not a member of any of those groups either. They were more thoughtful, a lot of them, and there was more full time with them, and they believed in the dramatic expression of the power of God in their lives. Now, of course, there are evangelical ministers who do a big whoop-de-doo when they have their 10 revivals or other kinds of huge en masse gatherings, and and you were healed, and well, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, I don't know. A lot of these Rolex wearing big hair guys fail to impress me very much with their spiritual veracity or their connection to God. I kind of think they work for the other guy, but and the other guy can heal too. So, yeah. But I believe in a full hands-on spiritual existence. I think you're either all the way with God 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or don't bother. What's the point otherwise? Is God not intimately connected with every aspect of your life at all times? Oh, he isn't. Oh, he just comes and goes? Or, oh, you come and go. There you go. Yeah, something to that effect. And, well, I don't believe in fairy tales, okay? I believe in, how do you put it? I believe in what I have proved out because I trust and verify. I make sure, okay? And there's a lot that I can't be completely sure, but I have a kind of spiritual algebra I use that allows me to shoot around corners. And of course, I have the intuition. Now, we all have some degree of intuition, but only a few of us have an awakened intuition. And when you got that, you pretty much got everything you're ever going to need. Intuition actually means inner teaching. And everyone has an intuition, except for the people there's pretty much like an appendix or something, Actually, some people have their appendixes taken out, and well, I don't know. There could be some very interesting relationships one could make from that, but I'm not going to bother about that at the moment. Anyway, now I've had some very, very remarkable things happen in my life. I'm not going to sit here and talk about them, but they happen these days almost very, very frequently. But there's nothing special about me in that regard. This could be happening to any of us. But not all of us are pursuing God relentlessly and intensely throughout the entirety of our everyday. And if you are, God's going to notice, okay? But if you're just like, you come and you go, and it's like playing the guitar an hour or two a week. It's going to take a long time to play very effectively, unless, of course, you've got the past life gene and stuff. Anything you want to do well and get very proficient at, you're going to have to put a whole lot of time investment in. And that's just the way it is. Okay. But anyway, I want to drop back to Jesus Christ for a moment. Now, Jesus Christ is known all over the world by different names. And in India, is known as Lord Ishvara. And if you look him up, Ishvara, you can look him up and see what they have to say about him. But that's basically Jesus Christ, the same person. And I guess all of you are familiar with the fact that Jesus was missing for 17 years. And from what I have studied and what I've been told to the intuition and otherwise, he was in India most of that time and hanging out with the rishis and certain very advanced illumined yogis. And, well, that would make sense, right? And then he came back and he did that 3 years of preaching after John the Baptist did the ritual with him, and the dove appeared in the heavens and said, "This is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased." Something in effect. Yeah. So, I don't want to get into a conflict with traditional Christians or anything like that. I mean, there's no way really around it, though, because they are going to criticize and react to what you have to say about the matter. And we'll leave it in God's hands, and God will decide, who's right, who's wrong, or if both people are wrong, or both people are right, according to their own, schematic within the province of a certain, bandwidth. What's true here, but may not be true here, but is definitely true here. And because it's levels of awareness and the rules change. Depends on where you're at, my friends. I want to mention Mikhail Ivanov. Now, all of a sudden I was moved, intuition again, to read him. I've been reading him over the course of my life, a book here, a book there. But I went to eBay, and what do you know, there were 15 of his books available for, 40 some bucks. So I bought them. It was a very, very good deal if you're buying these things retail. And most recently, I have read The Power of Thought, followed by The Mysteries of Fire and Water, and then Light is a Living Spirit. And he gets into depth and detail about the elementals, the Lord of Fire, water, air and earth, the invisible side of the kingdom of Mother Nature, and fire and light, and fire is a kind of light, and talks about the sun, physical sun is the source of all life on this planet. And we are all composed of sunlight, frozen sunlight, sunlight is an extension. Everything is sunlight, different degrees of density. And those who are committed to this particular path I'm talking about and all become more and more like sunlight until they pretty much just exist in a solar body. And that's there for anyone who wants to put in the due diligence. I'm one of those people. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what it takes. Period. Anyway, the spiritual sun created the physical sun. The only difference between the spiritual sun and the physical sun is that it's a much higher frequency. It's vibrating, and so it's at a much finer level of substance, the one over the other. Now, we have two terms, force and matter. Okay, and they operate in our world all the time, always going on one or the other, many, many permutations of each one. In the Hindu tradition, force is called prana, and matter is called ether at the highest level. But in other words, all matter comes from ether. It precipitates down into form, and everything we have here is a embodiment of an expression of ether. And all force, everything, the entire motivation for all industry and all that's going on, walking down the street, like anything you do that involves force, and then of course motion, is prana. And depending on what you do with it is the world you make for yourself. And the influences that impact upon us vary depending on the time we're in. You've heard we're in the Kali Yuga now. Some have said we have now moved into the Dorpa, and a great golden age is coming. This is what I believe, and others think the Kali Yuga is going to go on for a very, very long time yet. And I don't know about that. But we are in a time of intense materialism. And so the influences that are pretty much everywhere around are materialistic, okay? And that's why, there's faithless generations, and a lot of atheism, a lot of Satanism, and also a lot of insanity. Because as materialism intensifies, so is the insanity, okay? And there are various reasons for this, but I think if you think about it, it'll come to you, actually, because you also get further and further away from God's teachings and the higher moralities and, certain awarenesses. All this kind of goes by the wayside when materialism comes to predominate, okay? And materialism and Satanism are interchangeable. Satanism is basically the religion of materialism. Look into it. Look at the tenets of Satanism, what they profess. pretty much all that they say. I'll read the book by Anton Xanador LaVey. And so there's a lot of this all going on. You may not see it, but you feel it. And so it's a lot more difficult in this day and age to advance spiritually because there's such the peer pressure and the preponderance of everything that's going on in this time. It is what it is. And but the good news is that because of the great degree of difficulty, it's very difficult to advance, to live spiritually and to maintain your integrity and to have these qualities and principles that are necessary to impress God, or to get God's attention, or to be all right with God. There's a lot of degree of difficulty. You pretty much have to leave actually to get fully into it, and you don't get much done as far as helping people that way. Although, and again, does anyone ever really help anyone anyway? It's all karma, isn't it? However, there's a degree of difficulty. So because of this degree of difficulty in this time, you are in a position to make a quantum leap spiritually. You can evolve and move past all sorts of things you might have had to experience otherwise. Instead, if you're like in the right state of focus, you can move extremely high and rapidly because it's so difficult. But it's not too difficult. It never is. But that's the big payoff here with this scene, my friends. And you need to keep that in mind because it gives you reassurance. It gives you hope. You got to understand that God is present at all times and everywhere, and is right there with you. And if you're not thinking so, that makes your situation so difficult. But if you're convinced and you know for a fact God is present in your heart and mind, you're invincible on a certain level. Nothing's going to be able to get you down. Nothing's going to be able to rob you of your faith and your conviction of the reality of God. It's a time of trial. It's difficult here. Trust me. I don't have to tell you, do I? Surely you know. Now, I don't know who all is listening to this. Probably quite a variety of people with different levels of agreement or skepticism or belief in what's being said here. Well, that's fine either way. Take it for what it's worth, It's useful to you, any of it is. By all means, take it and apply it. If it isn't, it doesn't speak to you, pay no attention whatsoever then. Because I'm not here selling anything. In fact, there's nothing for sale here. There are no products. This is all freely given because I got it freely too. I did have to put a lot of work and effort in, and I did have to suffer to learn the things that I have learned, and some of which we will talk about in succeeding discourses. These first few discourses are going to be me familiarizing myself with doing this and being spontaneous and speaking extemporaneously right off the cuff. And it takes a little getting used to. I used to do this kind of thing a lot more regularly. I had a TV show once, and process it doing something over and over again. You get pretty good at it. There might be different opinions on that, but I did a lot of comedy and that sort of thing. Although I made it a point to talk about God, you may be sure. God is the single most important thing in my life. Should be in everyone's life, but not everybody's that smart. And believe me, it's very intelligent to go with God because the alternatives can be Maybe you've had something bad happen in your life once or twice. You've certainly heard about bad things happening to people. You probably want to avoid that kind of thing. I'm not here trying to scare you or anything. I'm just saying, why wouldn't you want a buddy like God, who is master of everything, up for anything, not to be messed with by anyone? And of course, I mean, you might get a little bit of rough and tumble here and there. You might get injured a little bit too. I don't know. But if you're committed to God and completely connected, at a certain level, according to God being able to see that in you, it's probably going to work out very well. And when it doesn't, there's going to be a reason. It's going to have it's going to have a purpose to it. But it's all, it's always going to end well. It's always going to come out in a very fine way. All things work for good for those who love the Lord. That's a lot of, I do refer to the Bible a great deal because most of you are Christians. For myself, I refer to, yes, many another form of teaching because I've done that, I've taken what works and that's what I use. What works for me. I know there are things that I don't do that other people do and it works for them, And what's working for me right now is reading these books by Mikail Ivanov, so I'm recommending them. He talks in the simplest manner. There's nothing complex about him at all. It's almost as if he's talking to a high school class or something, but yet he gets into very deep points. But he humanizes it all, and you start to feel as if, since I've been reading, I look at fire and water, air and earth a lot differently than I once did. And of course, I ran into a lot of these spirits when I was taking LSD and running around nature. I saw all manner of elementals and nature forces that vibrate at a higher octave, but I was able to see at these octaves then because I was raised in consciousness to a certain level, but I had departed from it over the years, You get away from things, they slip away. You don't even notice maybe that it's happening, but it does. But now all of a sudden I'm aware of the naiads, and the forces of water and the salamanders with the fire and the sylphs with the air, the gnomes with the earth. And well, he talks about, communicating with them and being aware of them and getting in touch with the spirit of water and the things that water can teach you, like being more transparent, more flexible, more adaptable. And also, water is a medium of purification, and you can apply it to yourself just as you can with fire, which also is a force of purification. And you can apply these things to yourself and you can come up with some surprising results. From what he says, well, it's getting time for me to, to say good night. And I want to thank you for having been here. And I hope you enjoyed this. I'm rambling on as I do. And I hope to get much more clear with it and more in touch with what I'm trying to do as time passes. I have to get through the crust of my resistance. To a certain point, I have to become more familiar with it, and it'll happen. It'll happen in time. So, my friends, many blessings upon you, and may God flower in your heart, and may you come into contact with your higher self who's present in you right now, watching through your eyes and listening and hearing. May you have a greater and closer communion your own higher nature. And this is what I wish for you. And God bless and keep you until we are together again. Be well, my friends.